Retro Requiem.
Hello there, I'm Peter Padden of Retro Requiem, and I'm here talking with Carlos Bordeu, one of the founding members of Ace Team, the developers of Zeno Clash, Rock of Ages, and the recently released Zeno Clash 2. Hello there, Carlos. Thank you so much for speaking with us. How are you today?
I'm fine, thanks, Peter. Glad to be here.
Alright, that's good. Now, Carlos, I know that your team started from humble beginnings, originally starting as a modding team for Doom 2. Can you tell me about how that started and how that grew into the current Ace team?
Well, not everyone knows it, but the origin of the name Ace Team is Andres, Carlos, and Edmundo, which are the first letters of the names of three brothers. We're three brothers who we really liked video games, and we started making mods of Doom and other small games just for fun. And back then it was only hobby. I mean, we were really big fans of Doom 2, and we made a full-scale Batman Doom game where we basically changed all hell and monsters of the classic Doom for Gotham City, and we put in the Joker and all these enemies. And for us, it was really like almost like a job. I mean, we really took it seriously. And over the course of years, we started working on other mods as technology sort of progressed. So did our modding skills. We then worked on a mod for Quake 3 Arena that was actually one of the, if only this only single player mod that was ever done for that game, which was called The Dark Conjunction, which was had this sort of Lovecraft inspirations for some monsters. It was a smaller project, but it was a full-scale total conversion. And working a little bit like this, we ended up going to Source. And by the time we were working on Source, our plans were actually we wanted to make Xeno Clash real game. I mean, we were the story of how Zeno Clash started is practically to say that we started a private mod that we were going to show to Valve.
Okay. Well, you currently have Zeno Clash 2 out. What did you learn from working on the first Zeno Clash that helped you with making the second, and what was your experience working on the game?
We learned very much working on Zeno Clash, and I think Zeno Clash is a very, very, very specific game made for the fans. It's really, we really took into consideration what people wanted to see, what the really big fans of the game wanted to see for the second one. And obviously, Xeno Clash 1 was very restrictive due to due to our limitations as a studio. We weren't big enough to make a bigger game. When you say humble beginnings, even when we were working on our first Xeno Clash, during the majority of development time, it was actually 6 or 7 developers working on a single player action sort of adventure title, and that was quite a challenge for us. I mean, single player games in the first person genre is not really what you see a lot of indie developers do. I mean, you do see maybe more first-person games in smaller companies and some smaller studios, but more usually in the multiplayer is scene, and that's obviously because you have maybe I'm not going to say it's easier to do because there's a lot of challenges in terms of being able to make something that can be competitive enough and interesting enough to get enough people to play it. But there's a lot of things that you really don't have to take into consideration when you're making a multiplayer game. So it was a very challenging experience for us, and we pretty learned what to do and not what not to do the hard way, like by bumping against a lot of walls and tripping with a lot of rocks. I mean, it was a very experimental game. With Xenoclash 2, we already have the things a bit quite more clear. I mean, it was a very direct follow up to the previous game. We improved on a lot of areas. Obviously, we tried doing some new stuff. The game isn't perfect, but we're very proud of the scale and the accomplishment of the studio. And just to a bit reinforce something that I think some people are getting wrong, that we still are a very small studio doing a very large game. Because, by now, Ace Team is only 15 people and doing a full 8+ hour campaign game with co-op on 3 platforms for a team of 15 people. This is a pretty big challenge.
Well, it seems that your hard work has been paying off. Well, Zeno Clash 2 is out on Steam, but what can we expect it to be released on PS3 and Xbox 360?
We're really working as hard as we can to get it. I really feel I kind of owe an apology to the people that are waiting for it on the consoles. We really did our best to try to have it launched at the same time, but it's just a matter that it was just too much work for such a small team. This is something we've had problems with before as a studio. We did have enormous delays with the launch of PS3 on Rock of Ages, and that's been a bit the problem of going through this learning curve of having to deal with so many stuff, having a relatively small team. Actually, there's only 4 programmers here in the studio, and with Rock of Ages for a good time there were only 3. So when it's going to be out, we're going through all the hurdles and everything of certification, which can be difficult, but we're hopefully soon. We'll have news as soon as possible about when people should expect the game on the console.
Okay. Now, Ace Team is known for having a very unique and surreal art direction and atmosphere throughout all of your games. Where do you get these ideas and what inspires it?
I think that we well, I think the creativity and the passion for art and stuff like that is what I would be the first thing to say, that we are all very passionate about art and um, creativity. But if you want to take the answer into another direction, I could say that it's it's actually something that's very important for us in terms of surviving in this pretty competitive industry. If you're going to be a rather smaller company making games that belong to the genres which basically the big boys deal with. I mean, there's not many studios doing first-person titles, first-person games in the rather smaller companies. There have been some really excellent examples. The guys from I don't remember the name of the studio, but Amnesia is a great example of doing something different. The Chinese Room, they made what was the name of this game? It happens in the island. Well, there's a few actually very few small developers doing games on the first person genre, and if you're not going to differentiate yourself pretty drastically from what the bigger AAA studios are doing, you're not going to have any competitive edge, because on production values alone, you're never going to do it. I mean, we're talking now that first-person shooters are probably done within budgets of $20 million, stuff like that. And obviously, as a small indie team, you're talking about doing something with a lot less time, less people, not such a big budget. So it's really important that you stand out from the crowd by being different. And I think that's while our game's never going to have maybe the production values of bigger titles, I think we outclass most first-person games in terms of originality and innovation. So, and that's our main weapon. That's what we choose to fight in the category on our own. That's what we're bringing into the genre. It's making something unique that feels fresh, that feels completely different from everything else.
Okay. Well, being a small developer, what advice would you give to others hoping to try to make it in today's gaming industry?
Well, I think that's pretty much relates heavily to what I was just talking about. I often see, I often get questions about this sort of thing, even here in Chile, about other developers who want to get into the game development scene. It really depends what you're aiming to do. I would say that one of the first recommendations is something we're actually pretty poor at doing. Something that we've made the mistake so many times is to plan smaller games, not be overly ambitious. We I feel that sometimes our games we've tried to do so much, and yes, it pays off in terms that we can maybe make more stuff which is more interesting, but on the other side you see so often so many teams trying to do bigger things that they're never realized, and they're never finished because they're just too ambitious for a small team. And with regards to this, also try to make something that clearly has its uh, own style, that it cannot be confused with anything else out there. If you're going to try to do World War II first-person shooter, at this point you're pretty much not going to be able to compete unless you're giving it a pretty original twist or something. The game at least has to have one element that it's really drastically different from whatever else has been made. Because if not, you're gonna drown in a sea of in an ocean of other games that look like yours, and obviously you're not going to have the production values of other bigger titles.
Great advice. Well, so before we end this interview, what is next for Ace Team?
We actually already started working on our next project. There's no vacations here, so uh, yeah, but we started working on something completely new. It's not a Zeno Clash game. It's not a Rock of Ages. But I think what I can safely say without, because I'm not really allowed to say what it is yet, is that people should expect something again that's pretty much has those ingredients that we're well known for. That's a very interesting art style. It's something different, and also we often work very well at mixing genres and doing like doing some radical ideas in terms of game design. I also think this game is going to have a lot of stuff in to talk about, but all that is, it's a little too early to be talking about our future project.
All right, well, I'll be looking forward to that.
Okay, that's good. Cool.
All right, I would like to thank Carlos Bordeu for speaking with us today. You can check out Zeno Clash 2, now out on Steam and soon PS3 and Xbox 360. All right, this is Peter Padden of Retro Requiem. Thank you for listening.